Hello Misfits and welcome! In today's video we are diving straight into the 2024 Player's Handbook. Specifically, we are going to be giving a broad overview of this new revised version of the Player's Handbook so that I can tell you what exactly is in this book versus what was in the old book, okay? So I'm going to tell you what was cut, what is still in it, and what has been added. And just to clarify, this is a broad overview. I am not getting into the specifics. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what exactly is in it but has been changed in some way. I'm just letting you know what's in the book so you can decide if this is the right book for you. Before we go any further, I do want to take a moment to talk to you about Zombie Road RPG. So some of you may remember that I reviewed Zombie Road RPG by Dragonmount Press a little while ago. This is a TTRPG where you and your friends play as yourselves and work together to try and survive a zombie apocalypse. The game is launched, it's live on GameFound, and it's now your time to go get your copy. I believe following the GameFound page will get you a free gift for the Convoy of Carnage adventure module, so be sure to go check it out. And I can tell you that my table had an absolute blast playing the game, and I'm so glad I had a chance to review it, so I could not recommend them more. So be sure to pop over to GameFound, check out Zombie Road RPG by Dragonmount Press. I do think there are a couple more stretch goals they're hoping to meet, so be sure to check them out. I have my notes pulled up, I am ready to dive in, so let's do it. Let's talk about this new Player's Handbook. So first things first, it's definitely bigger than the old one, okay? I got the old one and the new one, and yeah, this guy is definitely on the thicker side. It has about 70 more pages than the old book, than the 2014 copy. I do know that the new book has a ton of art in it, so that's probably contributing to that higher page count a little bit, but there's definitely new stuff in here that wasn't in the old book. First things first, I want to talk about the general layout of the book. It has changed a little bit. In the previous Player's Handbook, the kind of explanation of all the different aspects of the game and how to play it were kind of spread out. Some of it was in the introduction, some of it was in chapter 1, and then some of it was in chapters like 7 through 9, and then some of it was in one of the appendices. So that was kind of all over the place. Now, all of that is in chapter 1, which is smart, you know? Why dump you into character creation if they haven't taken the time to teach you what the different ability scores are? You know, that didn't make a ton of sense, so I'm glad that they've fixed that. I think this organization makes a lot more sense. I'm gonna basically go through the table of contents and we'll go section by section and talk about what's been added or changed or things like that. So first things first, let's talk about the how to play section that now starts out the book. So really this is the same. I just think they do a little bit better job organizing the information and elaborating on some of the stuff that might be confusing. They also do add in some little snippets of information that are good, like encouraging you to go check out YouTube channels and recordings to see how the game is played. That's great advice. That's how I learned how to play the game and got into the game. So that's really good advice to offer new players. There's also now a new sidebar discussing what Session 0 is, which is great. There was absolutely zero mention of Session 0 in the old Player's Handbook. I don't think it got a mention until like either Tasha's or Volo's. One of those books was the first time it ever got mentioned. So now there's a sidebar, little box that's explaining that, which is really, really good. Cut content. In this sort of big, massive how to play section, there are a couple things that I didn't see like direct correlations to. In the previous Player's Handbook, there was a section called Time that was sort of talking about how different things that you try to accomplish in the game can take different amounts of time. Some things could take minutes or hours, some things could take days or weeks. I didn't really see like a devoted section to that. I believe, as far as I could tell, most of that got rolled into the sort of travel section, which makes sense to me. I also didn't see a dedicated section to resting or inspiration, but now there is a rules glossary in the back of the book, and so those things have been moved over to the rules glossary. So if you need to find information on that, you just head there. Things to note about this section: while there is a session 0 sort of explainer, personally, I don't think it's quite enough. I would have liked a little bit more on this, because I think if you're a brand new player, you're not gonna know exactly what that is and what all that could entail, so small criticism there. I just think there could be more written about that, or have like, you know, a dedicated section to it instead of like a little box in the corner. I also do want to talk about the rules glossary more, but I'm going to save that for later in the video. So after the how to play section, we move into character creation, and this also gets organized differently. So in the previous version, in the 2014 Player's Handbook, you would pick your race first, then you would pick your class, and then you would end by picking your background. So now in the 2024 version, you choose your class first, then you go into your origin and you pick your background, and then you end by choosing your race, and they've now changed that name, so now we call it species instead. A little side note, don't super love the term species. I wish they had gone with something like lineage or heritage or ancestry or something. Species is just like, meh, it's kind of weird. But anyway, so that's set up a little bit differently now. And I do want to go straight in and talk about the classes here. We get all of the same classes that were listed in the 2014 version of the book, but now we have new subclasses or some tweaks to some existing subclasses. So previously, in the 2014 version, you could have as few as 2 subclasses for a class or as many as 7 subclasses listed for a class. Now, every single class gets 4 subclasses. This feels way more even. Just looking at each class, they look more even to each other before you even get into all the mechanics and the rules. So I really, really do enjoy this change. Also, when I get into these different subclasses and what's been taken out and what's been added, I do understand that most of these subclasses were added in later books, like Tasha's or, you know, other like campaign modules and stuff, but I'm strictly comparing the Player's Handbooks, so that's what I'm looking at here, okay? So let's dive into all the different classes and the subclasses they lost and the subclasses they gained. So Barbarian, we lost the Path of the Totem Warrior. It does not make an appearance in this book, but we gained the Wild Heart and the World Tree and the Zealot Barbarians. So we get 3 more, and we lost the Totem. Barbarian only had 2 subclasses, which kind of sad. Bard, we gain the Dance Bard and the Glamour Bard. When we get to Cleric, we lose the Knowledge Cleric, the Nature Cleric, and the Tempest Cleric. This was one of those classes that had 7 subclasses, which is a little crazy to me. Definitely makes the Cleric feel more favored when you look at the older version, so it's nice to see it matched up with everybody else. When we go to the Druid, they added the Sea and the Stars Druid. For Fighter, we add the Psy Warrior. For Monk, we add the Way of Mercy. I know that that was introduced in other books, but now it's in the Player's Handbook, which is great. Moving on to Paladin, they add the Glory Paladin, the Oath of Glory. For Ranger, we add the Gloomstalker and the Fey Wanderer. Gloomstalker tends to be a favorite for people building Rangers. It's a pretty solid one. For the Rogue, we add the Soul Knife. For the Sorcerer, we add the Aberrant Mind and the Clockwork Soul. Also, the Wild Magic table gets a little bit of a change. There are fewer things on it than there were in the previous version, and now it skews to be more towards positive effects than negative effects. Previously, it was pretty even, but now, more likely than not, you're probably going to do something that's going to be beneficial, or at least not, like, totally detrimental. For the Warlock, we add the Celestial Patron, and for the Wizard, we lose the Conjurer, the Enchanter, the Necromancer, and the Transmuter. So we don't gain anything new for the Wizard, they just took away stuff so that it would be even. This would also be a great time to point out that just because your favorite subclass isn't in this book doesn't mean you can't play as that anymore. The book is designed to be backwards compatible, so if your subclass didn't make it into this book, you should still be able to play as it. It's just not in the newest book here. Something else that's really, really nice is there is art for every single subclass that's listed in the book, which is really, really great. Great source of inspiration. The art in this book is so beautiful. It's truly amazing, and I just love like flipping through and looking at all of it. Okay, let's move into Origins, which is where you would pick your background. We lost a couple. We lost the Urchin, the Outlander, the Guild Artisan, and the Folk Hero. Though the Guild Artisan, they may have just dropped the word guild from it because we gained a background that's just called Artisan, so I didn't look at the specifics to see if they are the same, but I bet they're pretty similar. And there's a few backgrounds that they added. We've got the Farmer, the Guard, the Guide, the Merchant, the Scribe, and the Wayfarer. Alright, now let's talk about species formerly called races. So we do lose a couple species here. There are some that were in the previous Player's Handbook that do not make an appearance here. And then we also add some that were added in later. Now they are listed in the Player's Handbook. So let's get into those. We lose the half-orc and the half-elf. So we don't have any like half species here, but we gain the orc, the Aasimar, and the Goliath. Something else to note is that I believe every species now has at least 30 feet of movement. I think the Goliath has more, but everybody else has at least 30 feet. Even little gnomes can move 30 feet, so interesting change. There are less pages for each of these species than there were for the Player's Handbook. The Player's Handbook, like each race got like 2 to 3 pages, and here you really only get like a half a page for each species, except elves get extra. They get twice as much info for them as everybody else, which honestly I don't think that was super needed. I don't think it really added a ton. I don't know, it's weird. Like, why are we showing favoritism to elves? They've always been the favored race. Let's give the love to somebody else. Alright, let's talk about feats. Okay, there are literally way too many feats in here. I am not going to tell you every single one that was added. I will let you know that there were 42 feats in the 2014 Player's Handbook, and there are now a whopping 75 feats in the 2024 Player's Handbook. All you really need to know is that they cut Dungeon Delver and Linguist, and then they renamed Mobile to Speedy. So you really only lost 2, and then they just renamed 1. Also, now feats are kind of organized a little bit differently. There are origin feats, which I think sort of get tied into backgrounds and stuff. And then there's general feats, and like all of those feats give you some sort of boost to an ability score, which is a really, really nice change. And some feats now have prerequisites, so I personally think that makes sense. I like that, but that's just something to note. Let's talk about equipment. There's really not many changes in this section. Something to note is that the net is no longer listed as a weapon. It's kind of been moved over to like just sort of general equipment and stuff. So something to point out there. And then of course they added the musket and the pistol to the weapons. All of the armor is the same as far as I could tell. They did sort of cut the starting equipment out of this section. I believe that has now been rolled into the character creation chapters, so you should be able to find it there instead of in this equipment section. I also noticed that they cut a section that was called Trade Goods that appeared in the 2014 Player's Handbook. As far as I could tell, in going back and reading that section, it seemed like it had to do with, like, being a merchant or running a guild, and, like, it had to do with, like, trading stuff, if you were that sort of career path or something, and getting money for it. I'm sure they took this out because people just didn't really use it much, so I think that's why it didn't make it into the 2024 version. I never used trade goods in any of the games that I've run, so something to note. New content. They did add a section for mastery properties that can be given to weapons. This will be a relevant section for people that take the weapon mastery feat. And so it has all these different, like, sort of mastery properties that can be applied to weapons. We also have the tools section. You do not get any new tools, but tools do get a greater emphasis in this book, a little bit more elaboration, and they moved vehicles out of the tools list, and they now have their own section within the book. Spells. There are a lot of spells in this book. There's at least 20 more spells in this book than there were in the Player's Handbook. I am not going to list every single new spell, but I will tell you which ones were taken out and which one was changed. So as far as I could tell, Branding Smite was cut from the spell list. There are other types of smites, but Branding Smite, I did not see it. I also didn't see Feeble Mind, but I am pretty sure that Feeble Mind has now been changed to be called Befuddlement. So something to note there. The next section in the book is about the multiverse. This is the same, it's just a little bit more streamlined, a little less kind of information that you don't necessarily need, especially if you are a new player. Then we get into creature stats. There are way more creatures in this book. There were 31 creatures in the 2014 Player's Handbook, and now there are 51 creatures listed in the Player's Handbook. All of the creatures from the 2014 book are in this one except for one, and it's a bit surprising. The giant eagle. I don't know why this creature did not make the cut, but for some reason it is not in this book. What do we think the reason is? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on it. I was surprised that I didn't see it. I checked like 4 different times. I was like, really? They cut that one? We're gonna cut out the giant eagle, but we're gonna give us a giant weasel? It's a little interesting, but but everything else is still in there, and then you've got more than you had before. All right, I've kind of gotten through all of your chapter sections. I really breezed through them. I tried to go through as fast as possible so that I don't go crazy trying to edit this video. So let's talk about some additional content that was cut. I did not see a section talking about the gods of the multiverse. This legitimately shocked me. In the 2014 Player's Handbook, you had extensive lists of all the various gods in the Forgotten Realms. And a lot of times they were separated by the pantheon type. You could look at just the Greek pantheon or just the Norse pantheon. So I was shocked to not have that in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and I'm not entirely sure why. I wonder if they're saving this for the DMG, or if they decided to cut this out because, our clerics and paladins don't necessarily have to follow a deity anymore to have their powers. I don't know, it seemed like an odd thing to cut out, so I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about that change. I assume we will get them in the DMG, but it's just weird to not see them in the Player's Handbook, since deciding to follow a deity can be a big part of character creation and building your character. So, an interesting change there. There was another section that was in the 2014 book that doesn't make an appearance here, and that's called Inspirational Reading. There was previously this section called Inspirational Reading that was basically a list of fantasy books that helped inspire the creation of the game or helped inspire some of the game designers over the years that worked on it. This has been cut. I mean, I can see why. And also, probably at this point, the list would be so extensive, they wouldn't be able to, like, you know, include it in a concise way, but that's just something that's been cut out. There are other sections in the 2014 Player's Handbook that don't appear in the table of contents. I tried to mention them as I went, like inspiration, resting, starting equipment. A lot of these have been absorbed into other relevant sections or put in the rules glossary. So now let's talk about that rules glossary. So now in the back of the book, there is a glossary devoted to just the rules of the game. This is great, super convenient if you're running the game or playing and you just need to look up some stuff real quick, it's all there. And I really, really, really like that. My criticism is that sometimes there is stuff that is only listed in the rules glossary, but no longer listed in like its relevant section. I want it in both. If I'm reading through the section on like travel and you know, it mentions that you can take a rest while you're traveling, and then it doesn't explain what resting is. I don't want to then have to stop and flip to the back of the book to find out what that means. I want it to be there in that relevant section. If I'm looking through the rules glossary, of course I want it there too, but I kind of just wish it was in both. It just seems a little weird to not have that. And I feel like if I were a brand new player, and I'm, you know, actually trying to read through the book, I might not realize that there are certain aspects of the game, like inspiration, for example, because it's not listed in that how to play section. And I might not think to check the rules glossary for like extra rules that weren't listed earlier in the book, you know? So that's something that that's a criticism that I have. Also, big criticism from me, there are no page numbers listed when it refers to another part of the book. So there are times when it'll like drop a couple terms and it'll be like, these are further defined in the rules glossary. And then it doesn't give you the page number of the rules glossary that you can find them on. That is unacceptable. That's a criticism, that's a critique that people have had for a while. Other game systems fix this. Like Pathfinder will list the page number so that you can easily find it really quickly. They really have no excuse for not fixing this. I don't want to have to I don't want to see a term, be told it's in the rules glossary, and then I have to flip to the actual glossary to find out the exact page number and then flip there to now find out what it is. It's just, it wastes time, and they could easily have just put the page number in there. That's an easy fix. So that's another criticism. But overall, it's a good book. There's a lot of stuff in this. It's a much better organization of this content and information than the previous Player's Handbook. I really do like it. I like the way it's presented. I like the way they've organized these things. I think the only thing that maybe is a change that I don't know if I necessarily agree with is maybe the changes to how they set up the character creation chapter. I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, I always visualize my character first, and then I go in and try to figure out what class and background best fits that. So I personally will never start by picking the class. I'll start by picking the species, the race, and then the background, and then I'll go into the class. So that's a change. I see why they made that change. They're really trying to emphasize that the species that you pick has no huge impact on your ability to play the class that you want. So that's why they've done it that way. But I don't know. That's the only thing that I will, if I were going through this book, I would have to stop and do that part out of order, because that's just not how I'm used to building my characters. But that is the book. Whew, okay. That's a lot of information. We'll see if I can edit this down and make it stomachable. I went really fast, so I'm very sorry about that. I was trying to get all the information to you quickly and not bore you with like long-winded explanations. So that's all I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video, if you found it useful, please feel free to like and subscribe. That stuff really, really helps me out. But more importantly, leave a comment down below. If there is a section in this book, an aspect of this book that you really want me to dive into and give you the specifics for, please let me know. And hopefully I'll be able to do that. But with all of that said and done, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and I will see you again next time. So, fun fact, I was without internet for 10 days, maybe 11 days. I believe my internet went out on like the 9th, and then, they did not fix it until the 20th. That's a really long time to be without internet. Not a big fan of that. Yeah, the reason why it took them so long is because the workers at this like internet company were on strike. So yeah, which, you know, it's important to strike. It's your right. But also like, man, internet, it's real hard to suddenly not have that. There was a lot of hotspot usage and stuff just to, man, trying to upload a video by just using your hotspot, not an easy task to accomplish. Yeah, I just sort of would set my phone down with the hotspot on and would just walk away. And, you know, in a few hours, maybe it'd kind of done its thing, but I'm very, very happy to now have internet back again. That was very, very difficult, a difficult time. Anyway, have a good day, guys.